Inside the Deck is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com, sellers of Magic the Gathering and many other card and board games. GatheringMagic.com, your #1 resource on Magic the Gathering, strategy, and culture.
Cube, a format created by the players, is growing at an alarming rate. It's been introduced on Magic Online and even featured as a format in the Players' Championship. Although this format is growing in popularity, many players still have no clue what Cube is.
Cubing is a limited format created by players from all of the sets of Magic that culminates a vision of whatever the player wants to create, either a very powerful environment or commons, uncommons, but it encompasses all the best of limited and constructed.
I think it's the best way to experience Magic as a whole with a format, say, like Commander or EDH. Even when you're playing a deck that encompasses the entire history of the game, most of the time it's just representing a certain part of that. Like, say you're building a mono-red ramp deck or even a Progenitus control deck. It's only representing a certain part, but a well-designed cube can represent every aspect, like from mono-red to 5-color control, like Quick and Toast, to white weenie, like it was in 1994. Like, all these archetypes are really well represented, and I like the fact that Magic is represented in that way in Cube.
Cube has been in existence for over 8 years, but most of its origins are unknown. It wasn't until 2007 when Tom LaPille spearheaded the format onto a bigger stage.
The origins of Cube are a murky, murky thing. There are 2 places that I've heard of it potentially coming from. Number 1 is in Canada. Just Cube as we know it apparently was a thing going back for a while, and this is like the Rich Hohen crowd around him way back in the day. Then there were people back in Pittsburgh who had the big box draft, and I think that centered around Andrew Cuneo. So that was just like every Magic card ever, and you drafted out of it. And both of these 2 things, I think, kind of like congealed together into what we now know as Cube. I don't know whether it's fair to pick one or the other. I know the name Cube came from the Canadian guys, but past that, I don't actually know. It just feels like it took on a life of its own after I started pushing it in like 2006 or whatever, and all of a sudden it's this gigantic thing. So that's as much as I can tell you about where it came from.
The genesis of Cube right now is play with the cards that you enjoy playing. Go and take the cards out that you like, put them together, make sure that there's enough of them, make sure there's enough in each color so that they're about balanced, about the same. Make sure there's enough so that the people who you want to play with have enough cards to play. And off you go, and figure out what you want to do with it. And there's a lot of different ways you can take it. You can do traditional, just these are my favorite cards. There's tribal cubes, there's common cubes, common, uncommon cubes, all kinds of stuff. So whatever you like to do, that's what you can do. That's one of the great things about cubing.
When you are building a cube, you are designing really like your own format. But sometimes, as just like in a normal limited set, you have to, specific cards exist for a reason. They may not be the most powerful cards, but they form to that specific strategy or that specific environment.
What I did in the beginning, I looked at a lot of cube lists that were online, like Evan Irwin's list, Tom LaPille's list, and I went from there, kind of saw what their ideas were. Like Tom LaPille made sure there weren't like a ton of double white cards in white, like all the knights, just to make sure people would not have to go mono white or die. And so there's stuff like that, just like making sure your white decks have like 1 and a white, stuff like that. But I've mainly looked at other lists. There are a ton of lists online nowadays, but I've usually used a lot of lists and have gone from there.
You can do a lot of different things with the cube. I mentioned before, the one that I have and that I like the most is to try to replicate a pretty high-powered constructed environment. But I've seen all kinds of people with all kinds of different cubes depending on what they like. I've seen a lot of cubes that focus on cards of low rarities because people like a less powerful experience. I've seen cubes with a bunch of power in it. Like, whatever you like out of Magic, if you have a cube, you can just go make it that. And I know I like mine a lot, but it's mine, and if you have one, you should make it yours.